Hey, welcome to our channel. Make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss our latest content.
The evening had started with the promise of warmth and enduring connection. It was our 8th wedding anniversary, a milestone Elias felt was significant enough to warrant more than just a quick dinner out. Lorelei, with her usual flair for intimacy, had planned a gathering at her parents' house, Arthur and Clara's place, a setting that always felt like a safe harbor. I remember standing in the living room, surrounded by the familiar scent of wood polish and Clara's famous rosemary bread. The air hummed with quiet conversation and the occasional burst of laughter. Lorelei was a vision in deep sapphire, moving through the room with a practiced grace that still managed to catch my breath after all these years. She introduced the toasts, her hand resting comfortably on my forearm, her smile bright and proprietary. "To 8 years," she announced, her voice soft but clear, lifting a champagne glass. "And to the solid foundation we've built." I returned her gaze, feeling a familiar, comforting surge of pride. We had our disagreements, sure, the minor tectonic shifts that occurred in any long-term partnership. But the foundation? I was certain it was granite, solid, unshakable. Arthur, my father-in-law, a man whose approval I had always tacitly sought, clapped me on the shoulder, his grip firm. "A fine run, Elias. You two set the standard." I exchanged a few pleasantries with Clara, whose kindness had always felt genuine, and settled into my seat. The conversation flowed easily, mixing with the gentle clinking of cutlery. Everything was perfect, almost aggressively perfect. Then, around the time the main course was served, my phone buzzed. A work email, followed by a text. Nothing urgent enough to interrupt the celebratory mood, but moments later, the phone rang again, a senior partner. I recognized the tone, urgent but discreet. I needed to take this call, and I needed quiet. "Excuse me," I murmured to Lorelei, giving her hand a squeeze. "Just a quick client issue. Won't be a minute." I stood up and stepped out the sliding glass door into the cool evening air of the garden. The muffled sounds of the dinner conversation followed me, a dull roar of happiness contrasting sharply with the sharp, distant voice on the phone. I walked along the paved pathway, the scent of damp earth and late-blooming jasmine filling my lungs. As I spoke, detailing quarterly projections and legal minutiae, my eyes, without conscious direction, drifted toward the brightly lit kitchen window. What I saw wasn't a sudden, dramatic event. It was a still life, framed by the white trim of the window, and it froze every single thought mid-sentence. Lorelei was standing by the large marble counter, near the professional-grade stove, and Silas was with her. Silas, her cousin, the introspective artist who had recently returned to town, supposedly to find inspiration or some equally vague creative endeavor. He had always seemed so harmless, so detached, almost awkwardly shy in social settings. But there was nothing awkward about the way they stood. They were too close. The distance between them was measured in inches, a gap only two people sharing an intimate secret would allow. I continued to murmur acknowledgments into the phone, my voice steady, my heart pounding a panicked rhythm against my ribs. I tried to focus on the call, to block out the visual, but my gaze was magnetized to the window. Silas leaned in, slowly, deliberately, and Lorelei did not pull away. His lips met hers. It was brief, a fleeting moment, lasting maybe 3 seconds, but the intensity carried the weight of years. It wasn't a casual slip, a clumsy family gesture, or a joke misread. It was a kiss that contained an entire hidden narrative, full of meaning, complicity, and profound intent. The shock hit me with the force of a physical blow. The air rushed out of my chest, leaving me hollow. My grip tightened on the phone, knuckles white, the plastic casing digging into my palm. I pretended I was still engrossed in the conversation, nodding, frowning convincingly, while my entire body attempted to process the image burned onto my retina. "Misread it. It's family." The desperate excuses surfaced instantly, a frantic attempt by my mind to protect the fragile structure of my reality. A quick peck on the cheek, maybe the light was wrong, but the image had already developed in my mind's darkroom, sharp and clear. There was no ambiguity. It was the precise, defining moment when an invisible crack, deep and lasting, formed exactly where my trust in Lorelei used to be. Until that second, I had been utterly certain about our marriage. Sure, the passion had dimmed slightly, a natural consequence of familiarity and routine, but the foundation? I believed it was anchored by mutual respect, shared history, and unshakable loyalty. The possibility of infidelity had simply never occurred to me, let alone that it would come from within the sanctuary of our own extended family. Silas, the quiet, almost ethereal artist, was an unlikely agent of destruction. Seeing them together felt like discovering a foundational fault in the house you've lived in for years, a fault that had been silent, hidden behind layers of wallpaper and paint, until the moment the whole structure begins to give way, silently, right before your eyes. I didn't react externally. I finished the work call, my voice sounding unnaturally calm as I promised to follow up. I remained still for a few extra moments in the cool garden, needing the air, the silence, the sheer physical distance from the brightly lit window. The celebration was over. The clinking glasses and family laughter were now mere background noise to a singular, deafening thought. It was irreversible. I took a final, deep breath, forced a neutral expression onto my face, and walked back inside. Lorelei was chatting animatedly with Clara, laughing easily, as if she hadn't just shattered my entire world seconds ago. Silas was leaning against a doorway, sipping a drink, his eyes carefully avoiding mine. A cold, heavy feeling settled in my stomach. I sat down quietly, only responding when addressed directly. The weight of the secret was a tangible burning sensation inside me, a core of cold fire contrasting with the easy warmth of the celebratory night surrounding me. Every toast, every shared family glance, felt like a deliberate insult, a reminder that I was surrounded by people who were oblivious to the catastrophic reality Lorelei and Silas were concealing. The rest of the dinner was a blur. For Elias, the anniversary celebration had ceased to be a milestone and had become a pivot point, the invisible end of everything I had believed was unshakable. Our beginning had been marked by an almost frantic intensity. Lorelei and I had reconnected years after college during a university alumni event. It was as if all the intervening time had simply been a long, necessary pause leading up to that moment. Our conversations flowed effortlessly. There was humor, electric chemistry, a connection that didn't require effort, it simply was. For the first few months, it felt like we were living inside a romantic movie. We traveled spontaneously, shared our biggest, most private dreams, and built small, significant traditions that gave us the sense that we were actively, deliberately constructing something real, something meant to last. The first years of our marriage cemented that belief. We looked out for each other, celebrated the smallest victories, and above all, there was trust. I never felt threatened by her male friends or acquaintances. She, in turn, never questioned my friendships. Mutual security was the solid base upon which our life stood. But slowly, subtly, the small changes began to accumulate. About 18 months ago, Lorelei started spending longer hours at her design firm, citing new projects that demanded constant attention and unconventional scheduling. Our evenings together became rarer. She began prioritizing early sleep, claiming exhaustion, and demanding quiet rest for the coming day. I, who valued our long, rambling talks before falling asleep, noticed that the space for genuine intimacy was shrinking, replaced by a functional coexistence. Still, I dismissed it. Just a phase. A career peak. We'll get back to normal. It was during this period of distance that Silas returned to town. He had always been the quiet, almost mysterious cousin, a visual artist who spent long stretches abroad and rarely settled anywhere. His return coincided precisely with this distant phase in our marriage, and I noticed the growing closeness between him and Lorelei. At first, it seemed like simple, innocent family affection. Silas started showing up for impromptu lunches with Lorelei, offered to help her with creative projects, and gradually, his presence became normalized. But as the months passed, I started picking up on subtle signs that hadn't been there before. Glances that held contact longer than necessary. Quiet smiles exchanged during lulls in conversation. Conversations that abruptly stopped the instant I entered the room. Certain gestures, a quick, almost possessive touch on her forearm. A comment made in a low, conspiratorial tone seemed to carry a weight I couldn't articulate. I chose the path of least resistance, denial. Convincing myself I was overreacting was infinitely easier than confronting the possibility that something was deeply wrong. I told myself I was jealous, neurotic, simply stressed by my own work. There were days when I came home and found Lorelei distracted, typing frantically on her phone, only to quickly flip it over or change the subject when I approached. Other times, she would casually mention meeting Silas to discuss gallery ideas or visit an obscure exhibition. Everything always seemed so natural, so mundane, as if there was nothing remotely questionable. I tried to keep things normal, but a quiet, corrosive unease had settled into our lives. It wasn't just her behavior that had changed. It was the entire rhythm of our relationship. The sense of comfortable closeness gave way to a more functional, almost transactional coexistence. I tried to reclaim our time, suggesting weekend trips, date nights, but there was always a reason to postpone. Commitments, tiredness, differing priorities. Even so, until the night of the anniversary dinner, I clung desperately to the hope that we could recapture the spark. My unwavering trust in Lorelei was the only thing that kept me from voicing my small, mounting suspicions. For Elias, admitting something was fundamentally wrong meant accepting that the entire story we had painstakingly built over the years was now unrecognizable. And that was a possibility I wasn't ready to face. The drive home from Arthur and Clara's house was short, but it felt endless. Lorelei seemed perfectly content, rambling about how pleased her parents were and how exactly the evening had gone as planned. I responded in monosyllables, trying to contain the chaos raging inside my head. The image through the kitchen window was still playing on repeat, as vivid as if it had happened seconds ago. The closeness, the quick, deliberate kiss, the way Silas had looked at her afterwards. We got home. The moment we walked through the door, Lorelai took off her heels, dropped her designer bag onto the couch with a sigh of relief, and announced she was going to shower before bed. I stayed in the living room, sitting on the edge of the sofa, staring at nothing. The sound of her footsteps fading down the hall echoed the vast, gaping chasm that now existed between us, something I hadn't even known was there just hours ago. That's when I noticed it. Her phone, lying on the cushion, screen facing up. A small detail, but instantly alarming. Lorelai was obsessive about her phone. It was practically an extension of her nervous system, always clutched tightly or tucked into a secure pocket. I hesitated. A few seconds felt like an eternity. I knew what I was about to do was a violation of privacy, a final, definitive surrender of trust. But the need to confirm the truth, to move past the suffocating ambiguity, was overwhelming. I picked up the device. My thumb trembled slightly as I unlocked it. At the very top of the message list, pinned right below her mother's name, was Silas. Just opening the conversation was enough. The answers I had desperately feared immediately jumped off the screen. The messages started casually, but quickly escalated into intimate confessions and obvious complicity. There were mentions of secret afternoon meetings, references to shared moments away from the city lights, and insider jokes I didn't understand. I skimmed through the words, feeling a frightening mixture of incandescent anger and deep, bone-chilling coldness. Then, a voice note caught my attention. It was recent, sent just the day before. I pressed play. Lorelai's voice, unmistakable and clear, filled the quiet living room. With him, I feel like I'm acting. With you, I breathe. The brutal, unadulterated honesty of her words left no room for alternate interpretations. I sat there, phone in hand, frozen, absorbing each syllable as if every single one added monumental, unbearable weight to my chest. Acting. Our life was a performance, and I was the unsuspecting audience. I scrolled further, faster now, finding messages referring to short trips that lined up exactly with times she had claimed she was overwhelmed with work or attending an unexpected corporate retreat. The entire structure of her deceit clicked into place with horrifying, cruel precision. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, I began taking screenshots. I meticulously documented everything, every confession, every shared plan, every single piece of evidence like an essential piece of a puzzle I was finally, morbidly completing. I transferred the files to the small flash drive I kept in my wallet, placed the phone back exactly where I found it, careful not to disturb the cushion, careful not to leave any trace of my trespass. I sat motionless for several minutes, listening to the relentless sound of the shower running in the master bathroom. It wasn't just the discovery of the betrayal that had hit me. It was the crystalline clarity that this marriage, as I had known it, had already died long before I found out. The only difference now was my awareness. The night that began as a celebration had become the marker of an end. As I finally stood up, preparing to face the final scene, I knew that from this moment forward, every word, every gesture, every decision I made would be guided by the cold, unforgiving truth I now possessed. I heard the shower stop. A moment later, the bathroom door opened. Lorelai appeared, her hair damp, wrapped in a plush robe, looking relaxed and content, as if the night had simply been another happy family moment, flawlessly executed. I watched her for a few seconds, holding back the urge to explode. I needed every word I spoke to carry the gravity and clarity the situation demanded. "I saw you two in the kitchen," I said, my voice unnervingly steady. Lorelai froze mid-motion, sitting on the edge of the bed, her brow furrowing in instant confusion. "What are you talking about? You and Silas. The kiss. And before you concoct some flimsy story, I've already heard the messages, too." A heavy, suffocating silence filled the room. Lorelai looked away, gripping the belt of her robe tightly, a futile attempt to retain some semblance of control. "It wasn't what it looked like," she started, the cliché line dying on her lips as her own expression betrayed her. "It was exactly what it looked like." I walked to the nightstand, picked up the USB drive, and placed it on the bedside table. Then, I pulled the phone from my pocket and played the audio clip again. Her voice, clear and unmistakable, echoed in our bedroom. "With him, I feel like I'm acting. With you, I breathe." Lorelai closed her eyes for a fleeting second, an act of resignation. She sat heavily on the edge of the bed and finally spoke, the fight drained out of her. "Fine. It's true. I got involved with him," she admitted, her voice low, defeat mixed with lingering selfishness. "But you have to promise me you won't tell my family. It would ruin Silas's image." I cut her off, a choked, incredulous laugh escaping my throat. "Silas's image? That's what you're concerned about. What about mine? Do you have any idea how I felt? You worry about him, but you haven't spared a single second thinking about what you did to me." My calm facade cracked slightly. "You are unbelievably immature. You think protecting your cousin is more important than taking accountability for the destruction you've caused." She tried to interrupt, to offer an excuse, but I didn't allow it. Fine, I said, the rage settling into a frightening coldness. I won't say anything, not because he deserves my silence, but because I refuse to be part of this perfect family farce you two have been running. I paused, letting the silence drive home the finality. But you are leaving this house tonight. Figure out where you're going to stay. Lorelei's face tightened. I saw a fleeting look of shock, as if she had expected tears, pleading, or perhaps a second chance, but realized there was no room for negotiation. Without arguing, she stood up, opened the closet, and started packing clothes into a suitcase. The mechanical sounds of hangers scraping, zippers tearing through the silence, and the closet door slamming shut felt like a ritual of closure. Within minutes, she was holding her bags. She walked wordlessly to the living room, grabbed her purse and car keys. I remained still, saying nothing more. As she opened the front door, I noted the chilling absence of regret in her eyes, only a desperate urgency to escape the house, escape the truth. Lorelei walked downstairs and got into her car. The engine started, and the red taillights disappeared around the corner. I knew exactly where she was headed, and I knew my fight wasn't over. It had just begun. Tuyệt vời. Dưới đây là phần còn lại của câu chuyện, tiếp nối từ nơi chúng ta đã dừng lại. The 2 days that followed Lorelei's departure were a study in calculated calm. I moved through our silent house with a sense of methodical purpose, a surgeon preparing for a complex but necessary amputation. The grief was there, a deep, humming ache beneath the surface, but it was overshadowed by a cold, clarifying resolve. This was not a wound to be healed. It was a sickness to be excised. The first thing I did Monday morning was call a lawyer, a name a friend had recommended months ago for a business matter. I laid out the facts plainly, without emotion, a simple recitation of events. I emailed him the USB's contents, the screenshots, the audio file, and listened carefully as he walked me through the steps. Legal separation, initial petition, discovery, deadlines. I wanted speed and clarity above all else. When he asked if I was sure, I simply said, I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I authorized everything by email and transferred the retainer. When I hung up, I felt a calm that didn't come from hope, but from resolution. This story now had a legally binding expiration date. I knew Lorelei would eventually retreat to her parents' house, the family's fortress. The call came on Tuesday afternoon. It was Arthur. Elias, Lorelei is here, he began, his voice carrying that familiar tone of paternal authority, the kind he used when he intended to take control of a situation. What happened? I kept my voice even. When did she get there, Arthur? Today, he replied, his tone clipped. That's strange, I said, a deliberate, cold pause. She left our house 2 days ago. Do me a favor, ask her where she's been since Sunday night. Actually, I added, letting the silence hang for a beat, ask Silas where she's been. On the other end, the silence was profound, long enough for an entire dynasty's worth of pride and denial to boil over. When Arthur finally spoke, his voice was tight with indignation. Don't you dare say something so absurd. They are cousins. How dare you suggest such a thing? I respect you, Arthur. I always have, I said firmly, my own control finally fraying, but I will not let you disrespect me. I saw what I saw, and I have the proof. The call ended. It wasn't a polite goodbye. It was a cut, a severing. I stared at my phone screen for a few seconds. Arthur's contact photo, a smiling picture from a family vacation, seemed to mock me, a reminder that this was no longer a private matter between a husband and a wife. It was now family business, and they had chosen their side. So, I chose mine. I opened the family group chat on my phone. The avatar was a photo from last Christmas, everyone smiling, a perfect portrait of familial bliss. I typed one single, declarative sentence to provide context and eliminate any ambiguity. I am sharing this so there are no misunderstandings about why my marriage has ended. Then, I attached the files. The audio of Lorelei saying she acted with me but breathed with Silas. The screenshots with dates, replies, and subtle invitations, enough of a sequence to leave no room for doubt. I hit send. My phone didn't just vibrate, it convulsed. A flood of notifications erupted, confused question marks from aunts, shocked emojis from cousins. Then, a call from Lorelei appeared on the screen. I answered, holding the phone slightly away from my ear. How could you? Her voice was a shriek of pure fury. How dare you expose this? Have you lost your mind? I was accused of making things up. I replied calmly, the detached sound of my own voice surprising me. I figured it was better if everyone heard the truth in your own voice. You've destroyed the family, she shouted, her voice breaking with a rage born not of remorse, but of exposure. This was between us. Between us ended the night you chose Silas, I stated, the words cold and final. The rest is just consequence. You're cruel, Lorelei fired back, trying to twist her guilt into a weapon against me. I only asked you to protect his image. Did you have to humiliate everyone? Your concern has always been his image, not our marriage. I cut in. I'm not going to argue with you, Lorelai. I ended the call, went back to the group chat, and tapped the 3 dots in the corner. Leave group. The silence that followed tasted like both an ending and a profound, liberating relief. Minutes later, a private message from Arthur appeared. I need to talk to you. I read it and left it unanswered. My phone lit up again. A voice note from him, short and direct. I pressed play. His voice was choked, stripped of its earlier authority. I've spoken to Lorelai. You were right. I am sorry for what I said before. I listened to the end. I didn't reply. This was never about revenge or seeking an apology. It was about survival. I had just broken away from an entire life built on a foundation of lies. Responding now would only be reopening a minefield I had just narrowly escaped. That night, my lawyer confirmed the divorce petition had been officially filed. The process was underway. The fallout within Lorelai's family was, from what I heard later through the grapevine, catastrophic. My evidentiary bombshell hadn't just exposed an affair. It had shattered the carefully curated image of their perfect, cohesive clan. Lorelai, shaken and exposed in front of everyone she held dear, remained at her parents' house. Internal conversations, I imagined, exploded into bitter arguments. Clara, her mother, tried to comfort her daughter while simultaneously trying to understand how this had happened right under her nose. Uncles and cousins were divided. Some advocated for silence to protect the family name, while others demanded the unvarnished truth. Silas, pressured by accusatory stares and questions he could no longer artfully dodge, chose the easiest and most cowardly path. He disappeared. He left the group chats, stopped showing up to family functions, and ceased replying to the very messages he had once initiated with such secret ardor. The weight of the family name, once his shield, had become an anchor dragging him down. Days turned into weeks. Lorelai's lawyer attempted to delay the proceedings with procedural formalities. But the evidence was too strong, the outcome too predictable. Agreements that might have turned into protracted battles and other divorces were settled on paper with cold, accounting-like precision. The house, already in my name, and bought with my own funds before the marriage, a detail I was now eternally grateful for, stayed with me, its deed undisputed. Furniture was divided with a dispassionate efficiency. The wedding photos and albums went into a large storage box. I drove it to a storage unit one afternoon, and locked it away, not out of lingering anger, but because some memories are like shards of glass. The more you touch them, the more you cut yourself. The divorce went through without a dramatic courtroom scene. A signature here, another there. Seals, stamps, a quick, sterile video call with the judge. The relationship that had begun with sweeping promises and romantic intensity ended with the cold, bureaucratic finality of a business transaction. I ended the call, closed my laptop, and looked around the empty living room. The peace I felt wasn't excitement or joy. It was space, a vast, quiet, unburdened space where a future could now fit. Meanwhile, Silas collapsed under the invisible pressure his own family had created. Arthur, who had once thundered, "How dare you?" now barely spoke to his nephew. Clara avoided crossing paths with him at the few family lunches he dared to attend. Some cousins, I was told, would literally change sides of the street to avoid him. The atmosphere became unbearable. Within weeks, Silas announced he was leaving to pursue new projects in another city. He left without warm goodbyes, leaving behind the most important thing he had ever possessed, the illusion that his actions would have no consequences. Lorelai watched the fallout from the confines of her reconfigured teenager's bedroom. She had lost her marriage, and soon after, the emotional crutch that had kept her standing. Life at her parents' home was not a sanctuary but a gentle prison. Arthur was strict but fair. Clara was loving but firm. With every carefully managed conversation, a lesson emerged like an uncomfortable mirror. Choices have prices. Saying it was just a mistake doesn't undo the damage when the mistake becomes a routine. A year passed. Healing, I discovered, is not a grand, dramatic event. It's a quiet, cumulative process built from small, deliberate acts of reclamation. I started running early in the mornings again, the rhythmic pounding of my feet on the pavement a steady, grounding beat against the chaos of the past. I picked up a graduate course I had abandoned years ago, a course on architectural history that had nothing to do with my career and everything to do with a part of myself I had neglected. I took short trips on weekends without needing to tell anyone my itinerary. I learned to cook a complex dish I had always ordered from restaurants. I reconnected with old friends I had let drift away, friends whose lives weren't entangled with Lorelai's family. It was during one of these casual meetups, a relaxed barbecue at a friend's house, that I met Audrey. She wasn't a thunderclap. She was the quiet after a storm. She had a quick, genuine laugh, and an easy way of talking that was completely devoid of drama or pretense. Our first conversation was about bad 80-second movies and a shared love for a particular brand of spicy mustard. It was simple. It was real. We started slow, careful. I had learned that rushing ruins what is authentic. We went for walks, visited museums, and cooked dinners together. There were no grand pronouncements, no banners, no public announcements. There was just a quiet, growing certainty that something good was there. With her, I didn't feel like I was acting. But I also didn't feel like I was gasping for air. I felt like I was simply breathing. Normally, gradually, our relationship took shape. It was a structure built on the solid ground of honesty and mutual respect, not on the shifting sands of intense passion and hidden secrets. Something good was there, and for the first time in a very long time, that was more than enough. One Saturday afternoon, Audrey and I decided to take a walk in the park. The autumn sun was warm, casting long shadows across the golden leaves that littered the pathways. We walked hand in hand, chatting about light things, planning a movie for the night, debating the merits of different pizza toppings, the kind of effortless conversation that two people build when they feel safe with each other. A little ahead, on a wooden bench facing the duck pond, Lorelei sat with a paper coffee cup. She was waiting for a friend who was late. Chance, in its infinite and often cruel wisdom, did the rest. When she looked up, she saw me. She also saw the woman beside me. She saw the easy way my hand was holding Audrey's soul. She saw the relaxed intimacy between us. The way I leaned in to laugh at something Audrey whispered in my ear. I didn't see her. I was completely absorbed in my present, in the simple, profound happiness of a Saturday afternoon. I paused to watch a dog playing fetch with a young boy, my smile genuine. From her bench, Lorelei watched the scene with a tightness rising from her stomach to her throat. There was no shout, no confrontation, no excuse that could possibly fit that moment. All that came was a sharp, cutting question echoing inside her mind. How could I have done this? She stayed there, frozen, as Audrey and I slowly walked away, two ordinary people wrapped in the ordinary afternoon light, the kind of ordinary that you only learn to value after you've lost it. For a fleeting moment, Lorelei thought about standing up and calling my name, just to hear her own voice remind her what it once felt like to be near me. She didn't. She gripped her cooling coffee cup tightly, her eyes filling with tears that she refused to let fall. And the question returned, harsh and final, with no relief, no answer, and no one to blame but herself. How could I have done this?